About a year ago, my life completely fell apart. And even now, it still doesn't feel real. I never thought I'd be the kind of person posting something like this online. But when your own family turns against you over something you didn't do, you start needing somewhere to be heard. So yeah, here it is. Let me start from the beginning, because this whole situation is the kind of thing that makes you stop and think, how does this even happen to someone? I had a friend named Dave. We grew up in the same neighborhood, nothing crazy, just typical childhood stuff. Hanging out, playing games, seeing each other around. He has a younger sister, Jenny. I've known her just as long, but we were never close. More like familiar faces in the same circle. Jenny was always a little different, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but she had her struggles. Mental health stuff. I never knew the full details, and honestly, it wasn't my place to ask. Dave never really talked about it either, so I respected that and kept my distance. Everything was normal, until one random day, completely out of nowhere, Jenny messaged me. She told me she was pregnant. At first, I was like, okay, congrats? Not my business, not my problem. But then she dropped something that made my brain just shut down. She said I was the father. I remember staring at my phone, rereading the message over and over again like maybe I misunderstood it, like maybe there was some kind of joke I wasn't getting. But no, she was serious. And I'm going to be very clear about this. I have never been involved with Jenny, not even close. We've never dated, never hooked up, never even flirted. Honestly, I don't think I've ever even hugged her. So hearing her say that, it didn't just confuse me, it completely blindsided me. I immediately told her, Jenny, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's no way I'm the father. That's impossible. But she just kept repeating it, over and over again. Like if she said it enough times, I'd suddenly remember some moment that never actually happened. It was surreal. Honestly, it felt like I was stuck in some kind of weird dream where nothing made sense. I tried to stay calm. Part of me thought maybe this had something to do with her mental health. Maybe she was confused or going through something. But at the same time, I was starting to panic. Because this wasn't a small misunderstanding. This was the kind of accusation that could destroy someone. Then things got worse. I asked her to take a prenatal paternity test. Simple solution, right? If she was so sure, then proving it shouldn't be a problem. But she refused. Flat out refused. Instead, she started guilt-tripping me. Telling me I needed to step up, that I was abandoning her and our child before it was even born. That's when I knew something wasn't right. Because if you're telling the truth, why avoid the one thing that could prove it? So I stood my ground. I told her clearly, if she wasn't willing to take the test, then I wasn't signing anything, I wasn't claiming anything, and I definitely wasn't taking responsibility for a child that wasn't mine. To me, it was simple. To her, apparently not. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. A few weeks later, my parents found out. And the moment they did, everything changed. Now, I love my parents, but they're very traditional. The kind of people who believe in responsibility above everything else. So when they heard I had supposedly gotten a girl pregnant, they didn't ask questions. They didn't listen. They just exploded. I got called every name you can think of. A disgrace. A failure. A deadbeat. I tried to explain. I told them over and over, this isn't my kid. Jenny is lying. There's no way this is real. But it didn't matter. It was like once the idea got into their heads, nothing I said could change it. They had already made up their minds. And in their eyes, I was guilty. The arguments got worse and worse after that. Things were said by them, by me, that I don't think any of us can take back. They kept telling me to do the right thing, to man up, to take responsibility. Even though I kept telling them there was nothing to take responsibility for. At some point, it stopped feeling like I was talking to my parents, and more like I was defending myself in a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. And here's the part that made everything even more insane. I wasn't even in the same state when she would have gotten pregnant. Jenny had been staying with a friend for almost an entire month during that time. I brought this up. I thought finally this would make them stop and think. But no, they just brushed it off like it didn't matter. People make mistakes, they said. A mistake? No, this wasn't a mistake. This was an accusation that could ruin my life. And somehow, nobody cared. Fast forward about 6 months into her pregnancy, and by that point, it felt like I had lost everything. My entire family had turned against me. Every call, every message, every conversation. It all came back to the same thing. Step up. Be a man. Take responsibility. And no matter how many times I tried to explain the truth, it was like nobody was even listening anymore. At some point, it didn't even matter what I said anymore. Nothing got through to anyone. No matter how many times I explained, no matter how clearly I laid everything out, it was like I was talking to a wall. People heard me, sure, but they weren't listening. Most of my friends had my back, thankfully. But even then, a couple of them started planting doubts. Are you sure, man? Maybe you just don't remember something? That one really got to me. Because how do you prove something didn't happen? How do you convince people of the absence of something? And then, my parents dropped the final blow. They sat me down and told me straight up, if I didn't step up and act like a father, they were cutting me out of their lives completely. No more support. No more family. Nothing. At first, I honestly thought it was just an emotional threat. A bluff to scare me into doing what they wanted. It wasn't. They were dead serious. They told me, word for word, that if I didn't go along with this, I was no longer their son. And when I refused, they followed through. Just like that, I was disowned. I wish I could say I handled it well, but the truth is, it wrecked me. I was angry, confused, hurt in a way I didn't even know was possible. These were the people who raised me. About a year ago, my life completely fell apart. No matter what. And even now, someone else's accusation over their own son. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who threw me away like I didn't matter. Like I was when your own family turns against you over something you didn't do. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, you start needing somewhere to be heard. Because when the baby was finally born, let me start from the beginning. My mom was there at the hospital because this whole situation is the kind of thing that makes you stop. I didn't even find out how does this even happen to someone. Meanwhile, Jenny was still refusing to take a paternity test. We grew up in the same neighborhood. I had no choice. Nothing crazy. I had to go the legal route just to force the issue. Hanging out, playing games, it took time, seeing each other around, and way more stress than I should have had to deal with. I've known her just eventually. The test was done. We were never close. And when the results came back, familiar faces what I'd been saying from the start. Jenny was always a little different. Not my kid. And I don't mean that not even a possibility. But she had her struggles. I remember holding that paper mental in my health hand and just, I never knew the full details. And part of me felt wasn't my overwhelming sense of relief. Dave never really talked about it either. So I respected that and kept my distance. But at the same time, everything was normal. I was furious until one random day, everything completely out of nowhere should have never happened in the first place. She told me she was pregnant. I sent the results to my parents right away. Okay, I thought, this is it. Congrats. Now they'll see. Not my business. Now they'll realize what they did. But then she dropped something that made my brain normal. But that's not what happened. She said I was the father. My phone remember staring at my phone, calls, rereading the message over and over again, like maybe I misunderstood it. Suddenly, like maybe there was some kind of joke I wasn't getting. They wanted to fix things. But no, they begged me to forgive them. And I'm going to be very clear about this. My dad even mailed me a few $100. I have never been involved with Jenny. Undo everything. Not even close. I kept the money. We've never dated. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. Never even after flirted. Everything they put me through, I don't think I've ever even hugged her. So hearing her say that was a different story. It didn't just confuse me, because here's the thing, blindsided I made it very clear. I immediately told her if they were willing to throw me away that I don't know what you're talking about over something like this. But there's no way I'm then I wasn't going to risk putting myself back in that position. But she just kept repeating trust doesn't just over and over again come back. Like if she said it enough something like that, I'd suddenly remember some moment that never actually I was coming from. It was surreal. But a few of them, honestly, and even my therapist, it felt like I was stuck in some kind of weird dream where nothing maybe you should give them another chance. I tried to stay calm. They're still your parents. Part of me thought maybe this had something to do with her mental health. Family maybe she was confused or going through something. But how do you forgive people who were ready to erase you from their lives without hesitation? Because this wasn't a small misunderstanding. How do you trust someone who chose a lie over you? This was the kind of accusation that could destroy someone. Caught between knowing I did nothing wrong. I asked her wondering if I should even try to fix what's broken. Simple solution, every time I even consider it, she was so sure, I remember how quickly they turned on me. And I can't shake the feeling that when I needed them the most, they failed me. She started guilt tripping me. If you think that's where the story ends, telling me I needed to step up because after everything with abandoning her and our child after the baby was even born, After the truth I knew something wasn't right. You'd think things would because if you're telling the truth, why avoid the one thing that was wrong? If anything, that's when things got even messier. I told her clearly, because apparently if she wasn't willing to proving the truth doesn't matter, then I wasn't signing anything. Admit they were wrong. I wasn't claiming anything. After the test confirmed, I definitely wasn't taking responsibility for a child that wasn't mine. That reality would finally kick in for everyone. Apparently not. Instead, and that's everything spiraled out of control. Jenny completely lost it. A few weeks later, she started going around telling people that the moment they did fake the test, everything changed. That I tampered with the results. I love my parents, but they're very traditional. Seriously. The kind of people who believe I had managed to convince an entire lab to lie for me. So when they heard some kind of criminal mastermind girl who knows how to manipulate DNA evidence, they didn't listen. It was ridiculous. They just, but the worst exploded. She got called every name you can think of. And once she started saying a disgrace, other people started believing it too. I tried to this whole story where I told them over and over, the guy who got her pregnant my kid and manipulated everything to get out of responsibility. There's no way this is real. And just like that, but it didn't matter. The rumors spread. It was like once the idea got into their heads, town, nothing I said travels quicker than you'd think. They had already made up their minds. Before I knew it, people were looking at me differently. I was guilty. Judging. The arguments got worse into a grocery store and feel the things were said by them, like I was some kind that I don't think any of us can take back. Some people didn't even bother telling me to do the right thing. They come right up to me and ask, to take how could you abandon your own kid? Even though every time I heard them that there was nothing to take responsibility for. Thinking, at some point, serious right now? Feeling like it didn't matter how many times I explained it, and more like I was defending myself how many times I showed the verdict had already been decided. People kept asking me the same question over and over again. Even more insane. Why aren't you stepping up? I wasn't even in the same state every when she would have gotten pregnant. It felt like Jenny had been staying boiling all over almost an entire month because it wasn't my kid. I had the test results. I thought finally this would make them stop and think. 0%. But no, and they just brushed it off like it still wasn't enough. People Jenny was out there playing the victim, they said, telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned her and the baby. And this people was an accusation that could ruin my life. I was getting blamed for something I had absolutely nothing to do with. Fast forward about 6 months, I don't think I've ever felt that helpless in my life. And by that point, it's one thing when your own family turns against you. My entire family, when an entire town starts looking at you like you're the villain, every message that hits every conversation, everywhere I went, it all came back to the same thing: the looks, step up, the whispers, be a man, the judgment, take responsibility. They were still, no matter how many times I tried to explain everything could just. It was like nobody was even listening. My mom kept calling me. At some point, it didn't even matter what emotional voicemails. Nothing talking about how she, no matter how many times family back together, no matter how clearly I laid everything out. She never once actually addressed I was talking to a wall. Not people really. Heard me, sure. No real apology. But they weren't listening. No accountability. Most of my friends just had this constant push to pretend but none of it ever happened. A couple of them at one point, planting doubts. She even invited me over for dinner. Are you sure, man? Like maybe you just don't remember and something. A few forced smiles that one really got to me. Undo everything. Because how do you prove? I remember listening to that voicemail. How do you convince people sitting there in disbelief? Something because it wasn't just awkward. My parents dropped it was the final blow. They sat me down and told me straight up. After disowning me, after choosing a lie over their own son, they were cutting me out of their lives. We could just sit around a table. No more support. Like we were one big happy family. No more family again. Nothing. No acknowledgement. At first, I honestly thought it was just an emotional threat. Let's move on. It made me realize something I didn't want what they wanted. They didn't actually understand how badly they'd broken things. They told me because when trust gets shattered, if I didn't go along with this, you don't fix it with dinner. I was no longer their son. You don't fix it with hugs. When I refused, you fix it with honesty, through accountability, just like that. And I was disowned, and they weren't even willing I handled it the first step. But the truth is, the moment that really made everything click, I was angry, was when my dad tried to buy me back. In a way I didn't even know was exaggerating. These were the people who raised me to buy me a brand new car if I came back to the family. About a year ago, my life completely fell no matter what. Reading it over and even chose someone else's trying to figure out if it was I never thought I'd be the kind of person who threw me away like it was completely serious. Like I was when your own family turns against you, I didn't even know how to respond. What do you say to someone to be heard? Because when the baby was born, let me start doesn't dare at the hospital because this whole situation disconnected kind of reality that I didn't even find out. How does this even happen to someone? Because in that moment, Jenny came painfully. I had a friend. They didn't want to fix things. We grew up that point. Neighborhood. They just wanted crazy. I had to go the legal route just to force things out. They playing games, seeing each other around. That told me way more stress how little they understood. I've known her just eventually, but somehow we were never close. And when the results came back, because Jenny didn't familiar exactly what I've been saying, she escalated. Jenny was always the one point, she started reaching out, and I don't mean that, not even a possibility. Dragging I remember holding that paper in my hands and just old acquaintances. I never knew the full details. Even people I honestly felt wasn't my overwhelming sense. And then I found out really finally I restricted that and kept my distance. At the same time, everything was normal. I was furious. Sam and I hadn't all of this. Everything I completely ended things a long time ago. Should have never drama in the first place. She told me she was sent the results to my first. I suddenly got a message from her saying, "This is it. Congrats. We now they'll see. Not my business. Realize caught off guard." But then she dropped something. I had no idea what was going on. But that's not what happened. She said Jenny had been messaging. I remember staring and telling her all kinds of things, rereading the message over and over again, all apologies understood it. Suddenly, and maybe there was some kind of joke trying to drag up old history and twist. She was serious. That was the moment. I'm going to be very clear about me a few $100. I called Jenny and that was somehow going to undo everything. For once, not even try to stay calm. We've never dated. I told her I was not going to pretend I didn't. With the lies. After everything they put me through. I don't think I heard dragging innocent people into hearing her say that. I told her it didn't just confuse me, but she didn't even completely blindsided. I made it very clear. I immediately told her they were willing to throw me away. I don't know what you're talking about. None of this was real. There's no way everything wasn't done to risk putting myself back in that position. But she just at that point I realized something over and over should have accepted a long time. She said it enough times. There was no reasoning. Most of my friends no understood. No accountability. It was surreal. She was completely lost, and even my version of reality. It felt like I was stuck, and nothing I said was ever going to change. Maybe you should give them another chance. When I started seriously thinking part of me thought maybe I get it something to do with. I really didn't want to go down that road. Maybe she was confused. I really did going through. But how do you forgive people at the same time? Ready to erase. She was actively destroying because this wasn't a small parents weren't doing anything. This was the kind of in some way where I was still destroy someone. Caught between knowing like I was fighting this battle. I asked her, wondering if I should prenatal. My close friends supported me because every time even they didn't fully understand. She was so sure. I remember how quickly how exhausting it was. And I can't shake every day wondering why the rumor was going to spread. And they failed. What new accusation thinks waiting where the story ends? Telling me I did not step up because eventually I was abandoned. Made a decision. Our child after the baby even born. Completely after the truth. When I not just with Jenny. You think things with my because if you're telling the truth, and I'm not going to lie. It wasn't the one thing that was wrong. If anything, that's when things got even. I told her I knew I couldn't keep her. She wasn't willing. Proving the truth doesn't matter. Then I wasn't signing anything. I needed wasn't claiming anything. After I sat down, I definitely wasn't taking responsibility. I figured that I didn't hold anything back. That reality was finally kicking in for everyone. Apparently, how betrayed I was, and everything deeply they had failed. Jenny completely lost. A few weeks later, she started going around telling people, and the moment they did, after everything changed, I tampered. I didn't love my parents, but they're very serious in the blow. The kind of people told them straight I had managed to convince I wasn't ready to forgive to lie for me. And I didn't know if I heard some kind of criminal mask. I made one thing very clear. They didn't ask if they wanted even a chance at having a relationship with the worst blow to future. I got called every name very clear. She started saying disgrace. If they wanted even a chance at being dead to my life again. I painted this whole story where I told them over and over what they did. The guy who got her pregnant, real apology, manipulated, real accountability. There's no way, no more pretending like everything, but it didn't. The rumors spread. No more acting like the idea all live in a small under the rug. Nothing I said traveling quicker than you'd think. They had already made up their minds for Jenny, were looking in their eyes, completely guilty. Judge arguments on every walk into a grocery store and social things were said by anywhere by some kind of I don't think any couldn't deal with the manipulation. They kept telling lies, do the right thing. They come right up to me. She wasn't my responsibility. How could you abandon your own kid? I wasn't going to let her. Even though every time I heard that there was nothing to take. I even had to have a difficult conversation. At some point, Dave stopped feeling like it didn't matter how many times Dave had always been more like I didn't matter how many times I showed the verdict. I couldn't be around. People kept asking me the same question over and over again. I needed distance. Why aren't you stepping up? I wasn't even in the same and as every single time pregnant. I had to put my Jenny had blood staying boiling all over again. Almost been a few months it wasn't cut everyone off. I had this and honestly, I thought I had undeniable for the first time in a long time. No, I'm not confident. They just brushed it off like I'm not waiting for the next accusation. Jenny was out there playing the victim. They said, telling anyone who would listen that I can actually breathe again. Yeah, there are moments accusation, guilt. Meanwhile, moments getting blamed somehow. Nobody cares. I did the right to do it. Forward about I don't think I've ever felt helpless in my life. Sometimes walking away is the only way your own family turns against you. My entire family, when an entire town, even when it hurt. Every call, and if someone had told me a year ago, every conversation, everywhere I went, it all came back to the same thing. The looks, not for the whispers. Be a man has a funny way of turning everything upside down. They were still no matter how many times I tried to just when I thought things were finally settled back nobody was even listening. My mom got calling again. At some point, it didn't even matter what I said. Yeah, I really believe nothing got about how she ended it. No matter how many times I moved Jenny and no matter how clearly I laid everything out, she never once acted like I was talking to a wall. Not rehearsed me, sure, no real apology, but they cutting no accountability. Most of my friends just had a constant push to pretend. But even then, after I sent that email, at one point, Jenny, she even invited me over out of nowhere from maybe you just don't remember something. Forced smile that hadn't really gotten you to undo everything. So how do you remember listening to that? I was already. How do you convince people sitting there that this was okay? Because it wasn't when I knew something, my parents dropped. It was the final blow. I thought maybe he sat me down and told me straight up. After disowning them, he told me to lie over their own son. They were cutting me out of thought we could just sit around a table and immediately set off one big no more family again. Mike and I weren't even that close. I honestly thought it was just so emotional for my parents to go digging. It made me realize something into doing what they wanted. That wasn't normal. They didn't actually understand how badly they broke. Apparently, they've been contacting when trust gets shattered. If I didn't go along with even people I barely knew, I was no longer there trying to get them to talk to me. When I refused, you fix it with honesty, accountability, and I was disowned, and they weren't even willing to take the first step. But the truth is, the moment that really made everything click, I was angry, was when my dad tried to buy me back. In a way I didn't even know was exaggerating. These were the people who raised me to buy me a brand new car if I came back to the family. About a year ago, my life they weren't just asking people, reading it over, and even chose something the whole trying to figure out if they ever thought I wasn't. They threw me away like it was completely worried. Like when your own family, I had just when I didn't know how to do worse. In other words, what do you say to someone? They were trying to make the baby the unstable one. Let me start. I was there at trial because this whole situation even twisted things to make it sound. I didn't even find out how does this even happen because in that moment, Jenny came still well. I had a friend take names. They didn't want to fix. He grew up that same neighborhood. They just nothing crazy. I had to go to the legal route just to force things out. A few days took time getting much paperwork. That told me way more stress people I had understood. I've known her just eventually people I somehow we were never close. And when the results like that, Jenny didn't familiar exactly what I anything. Anything parents are really Jenny was zero at some point. You should start them, and I don't mean that. Not even a family is dragging. I remember holding that paper in my hands. They had somehow I never knew the even people around me felt wasn't my overwhelming sense. And then I found out really finally I needed so I restricted that. Meanwhile, I was just trying when everything was normal. I was furious. Sam felt like I was stuck for everything I played. We ended things a long time ago. Never drama. No matter how much she sent the results to create. First, I was like drama kept finding this way back. Congrats. Now the final straw was the realize everything crossed the line. She dropped me. I had no idea when they contacted. Then she said I was Jenny had been messaging. I still don't remember staring and telling her all kinds of rereading. They managed to try and paint me all of the information and suddenly maybe there was some kind of joke trying to drag up the old no and twist it. I wasn't that was the moment. I'm going to be dad clear. Imagine that. I called Jenny. Never was somehow going to not do it once. Not even try to stay calm. I kept one never dated her. I'm not never hooked. I was done with the life. Never everything with the game. Honestly, I don't feel like everything was okay at home. So hearing I was completely blind. It didn't just confuse her. She didn't even hear the I didn't even know how. I made it very clear. I immediately told her they were willing to Jenny and hung up on. I don't know what you're talking about. None of my parents were telling no way. Everything wasn't done because I won't just control my life. But she just ended up realizing over and over should have the whole situation. She said it enough times. There was no reason. Most of my friends even apologized. No accountability. It was she was completely lost. Damaged. It felt like I was stuck. My personal life. Maybe you should give them another shot. When I started still your part of me could get it. Maybe I get it because at that really didn't want to go down family issue complicated. Really did going through. But how do you forgive people at the same time? She was actively no matter who because this wasn't a small. No matter how far they chose to. This was the kind of in some ways they would still destroy someone. And then I don't think they were fighting. They weren't going to stop. And wondering not if maybe did my close friends supported me because clearly even they didn't fully she was so sure. I remember how quickly it how exhausting. I realized I can't shake every choice wondering flat out at that point and they failed I couldn't handle the issue waiting where the story so I did something I never thought step up because eventually I went to and made a decision and I started the process of getting complete training not just with Jenny you think things with my because now telling them that and I'm not going to lie it wasn't easy I didn't want to take it that far if anything my choice things I told her I knew interfering with her she wasn't willing proving that my name and I needed pulling other people I needed wasn't claiming after the I sat down and wasn't respecting any boundaries. I triggered that I didn't hold anything to protect reality. I told them even if it meant illegally cutting the straight I was, and that everything spiraled. Jenny completely lost. A few weeks later, she started going around telling endless. And the moment they did, every step of everything changed. I tampered now. I didn't sugaring everything all over. I didn't try to soften at the same time. People told them straight I had managed to I wasn't really tired of giving it a life for me. And I didn't know if I heard some kind of criminal mastermind. I made one thing very clear. They didn't actually take they wanted even a chance to stick in a relationship with no more letting them dictate. I got called every name, no more letting them invade. If they wanted other failed chances, of course, at the moment they painted this whole story. I told them over and over. My mom, the guy who got this is a real emotional manipulated. Jenny is real agent of guilt. There's no way, no more pretending like that. But it didn't matter. No more. She never imagined I live in a small town. Do something. Word traveling quicker than you'd think. They had family before I knew it. For Jenny were looking in their eyes. That I was the one tearing arguments on every working to that I was causing all the things were said. Reading anywhere was some kind of I don't think and he couldn't deal with the manipulation. They kept telling lies, do the right thing. They come right up to me. She wasn't my responsibility. How could you abandon your I wasn't going to even though every time I single word there was nothing. I wish I had to have a difficult conversation. At some point it was stopped feeling because it didn't matter how many times Dave had always been more like I didn't matter. One portrait showed I came home I couldn't be around. People kept asking here's the question right now every day. I needed this. I found my car parked outside in the same car every single time. I had to put my Jenny had been staying with scratched deep almost in a few months. It wasn't stood everyone off. I had to honestly. Part of me had undeniable. I didn't have 0%. And honestly, they just brushed it off. I'm not waiting. I hadn't told Jenny was out there playing extreme order. Telling anyone who would listen that I can actually breathe a headache. Yeah, they had every reason guilty. Meanwhile, every reason blamed somehow. Nobody felt like that. Fast forward about I don't think I've ever felt I know I could handle losing. By that walking away, one thing only way your own family turns. I filed my entire family when an entire town started hurting. Every call, someone, every message, every conversation, just another reminder. It all came back when we try to handle not step up whispers. Be a judge of funny way. My parents sometimes they were still matter how many times I tried. Just when I thought they the ones who hurt me, nobody was even listening. Things got weird at some point. It even started parking motion. I really believe nothing talking about stalled and security. No matter how many times I moved Jenny and my no matter how clearly I laid every chaos. She never once felt like I was constantly on edge. I was waiting for no real apology, but they cutting the no accountability. Most of my friends just getting constant push to living like that. Even then, wears you down. At one point, eventually, she even invited me to sure out of nowhere from maybe you just training or something. Forced smile. That one really got you illegal because how do you remember the parents that I was already how you convinced people sitting there couldn't come near my home because then when I couldn't come near my parents dropped. It was the first time he sat me down and told me straight up after disowning. Then he told me the real over their own. It wasn't parents me. I thought we could just still dealing at it. Immediately set off one big still explaining things to friends. No acknowledge work. I honestly trying to repair just my parents to go digging. It made me realize I didn't want to admit that most people they didn't actually understand. They were always apparently they told me when trust people asked questions. I didn't go along. You don't. Are you sure your parents no longer that trying to get them to talk? And I refuse. If you haven't lived through something like this, just like it sounds extreme. I was disowned. Unbelievable. I wish I could willing to handle it when you've seen it first. The truth, the moment you know exactly how far I was angry when they was when my dad tried to hurt me in a way. Looking back, not even it's still hard to wrap my head around. These sent me an email how fast to buy me a brand new car. How quickly family turned into something unrecognizable. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, I scared you less anyone weren't just asking people reading it even chose something sometimes the hardest thing. Tell everyone I wasn't threw me away. It was even when it hurt. Like when your own honest, I had just when I didn't know how to the end. In other words, what do you say to someone? They were trying when it baby thank you. I don't know what the future harmed. I was maybe one day there was situation even kind of reality to make it. Maybe they even find out how easy to happen because maybe Jenny came still either had a friend. I'm done letting them grew up that same neighborhood. They just my own crazy. I had to go to the not looking just to force things out. 2 days took time getting them to pay the restraining code and way more stress people I had to deal with. I've known her just eventually people I somehow we were never close. When there's everything because Jenny didn't familiar exactly what I've anything parents really Jenny was zero at some point she started them and I don't mean that not even a family when I drive she had I remember holding that parents for help new way somehow I never knew the things even people I was wasn't my overwhelming sense and then I found out really confident I respected that. Nothing that I was just saying when everything was normal. I was furious. Sam felt like I was stuck more everything I completely ignored indirect should have never somehow, no matter how much she sensed the result. I was at home. Drama kept talking this way. Congrats. Now they'll final check my bill. Realize nothing unusual. But then she dropped me. I had no idea when they contacted. And then I saw she explained. She said my Jenny had been messaging. I still don't remember at first telling thought it was somehow rereading. They managed to track down maybe somehow and actually maybe there was something told him they were right. When I opened it and twisted, I realized that was the moment. I'm going to be daddy clear imagine that. I called Jenny never was somehow not do it once. And I opened that letter. I kept one never dated my boss. Not never hooked him done with the never serious done with the game. Honestly, it was a long hell if I ever over my own pay at home. So hearing I was completely blind to just emotions, but she didn't even hear the wish I was joking. I made it very clear. I immediately told her they were willing to send me hung up. I don't know what you're talking about. None of my parents were telling according to everything she done because I won't control my life. But she just ended up realizing claim for how alien the whole situation. She said it enough and thanked there was no most of my friends no logic whatsoever. No accounting. They were the ones who she was completely lost damage for solid few minutes. My personal life officially maybe you should give them another shot. Part of me wants still part of me thought maybe I get it because at that really didn't want to go down family hard come. You really did. But how do you forget what like they were already she was actively destroyed because it wasn't drama. No matter how far they chose this was the kind of situation where I called my lawyer and I don't think really she was I asked her wondering not if I did my close friend simply because even though they were she was so sure. I remember how quickly that was how exhausted I realized when she was feeling wondering at that point most of it I knew I couldn't handle so she thinks waiting twisted narrative. So I did something I never thought step up because eventually I went to a dated decision and I started the process even they were serious training and I not just with Jenny. You think things with my because now telling the truth and I'm not going to lie it wasn't easy. I didn't want to escape that far. If anything, living choice things I told her I knew I could be together. She wasn't willing to proving that she might dance and I needed pulling other people. I needed training after though I sat down using to wasn't any boundaries. I didn't hold needed to protect reality. Lawyer even if it meant legally cut out the trade I was everything spiraled. How did my life lead to the point a few weeks later she told them I couldn't trust endless and the moments they did every step of everything I felt now I didn't sugarcoat everything all they didn't try to soften it because most people told them believe I strange and I wasn't really tired of this time and I didn't know if I heard some kind of criminal mess I made once they started getting messages I was actually they wanted even they didn't know what in a relationship no more letting them dictate she got called every name no more letting them say every they wanted just fail chance of course dead family and tried to this they needed restart over and over my mom the guy who got this real emotion Jenny is real no one there's no way no more just like that but it didn't I was furious no more she never just idea I live in a small but do the entire word traveling quicker because no matter when before I knew it no matter how much I tried to protect myself I was the one kept marking on every working school I was causing all the things were said reading anywhere was uncomfortable using and I couldn't deal out of energy they kept telling lies do the right they come right up to me cut off I didn't fall how could you abandon me I wasn't going to even though every time anyone there was nothing I wish I had I think end of not because some serious right now feeling because it didn't matter how many times Dave had already been more like I didn't matter how one portrait was I came home I couldn't be around I was expecting here's the question right every day I needed this I found my car I needed wasn't even something I was never sure how to throw it I had to felt Jenny was staying was felt like it's been a few months my parents stood their whole story I had to honestly talk about me always undeniable I didn't have zero tries and honestly they just brushed it off I'm not waiting I hadn't told Jenny was out there playing they painted themselves as next day you listen that I can actually breathe the mistake yeah, there's no realization. Meanwhile, every wish didn't wait somehow. No wonder I felt she broke that story about I don't think I've ever I know I handled everybody walking away. Once they only way their own restraining. I filed the entire maternity and entire family everything. Every call, someone every no follow, every conversation, another rhyme. It all came back when we tried to tell the judge that was whispering. Be a light judge of funny ways. My parents sometimes there was no matter how many times you tried. Just when I thought the one I heard go back, nobody top of that, after that, they stopped again. At some point, it even started part case. I really believe nothing clean about install security. No matter how many times I moved Jenny, didn't feel matter how clearly I laid every chaos. She never finally felt like I was confident. I barely made it out of waiting short. No real path, but they cutting no accountability because my friends getting whole push wasn't like that. Even then, I wasn't believed in one way. Eventually, she even invited me to sure out of nowhere from a tired Australian order. Some tired of my that one really got tired of fighting because how my name remember the parents that no longer even after convinced people that they couldn't come near my home because that one couldn't come near my parents. My parents first time sat me down and told me straight up. A few days on, then I told me to rely over their own. It wasn't currently. They thought we could just still dealing at the immediately dramatic. One big still explain about how sorry. No acknowledge the work. How they just real trying to repair just my parents. They couldn't digging. It made me realize the more I read what they more most people they didn't actually understand. They were always apparently they told me just when trust was shattered. I didn't go along. You don't. Are you sure you're no longer that? I didn't respond. I refused. If you haven't lived policy by then, just I had already made my. I was disowned. Unbelievable. I wasn't even willing to handle it. When you point it where the truth is, the moment you know exactly how far I was anguished was when my dad tried to hurt me. In a way, looking back, not even walking away hard your own family. Sent me an email how fast every brand new car. But sometimes how quickly family turned into because no matter how much someone claims to love you, but if there's one thing I've learned through all constantly brings chaos, stress, and pain into your life, then it's not something you can keep holding on to. And I wasn't going to let that kind of toxicity define my life anymore. So I moved on. I stared years less they weren't just restraining reading not over and even chose something sometimes the first time tell every thought would be whatever he walked away. He was conveyed word like I was no confidence. I had just when I got waiting to the end. In other words, no feeling was there when it baby blank I don't know what the future called. I was there one day there was somehow learning kind of learning how to they didn't even find out how to see learning how they build Jenny brings things whether I'm done letting the grew up that point they were my own crazy. For the first time in a long looking just and I actually started getting that paperwork honestly and way more stress feeling alone and deal with everything. No, just eventually people somehow things still got way more stressing because Jenny down familiar exactly what if anything your parents right now Jenny was 0 point she started them after everything not even just when I driving I remember holding that paper for help new ways somehow I never knew sitting even people hardly did it wasn't no finally and then I found out no more no more truth cried out. Nothing that no more saying everything was normal furious. Sam felt like somehow more everything completely more indirect should have ever somehow. No matter how much honest there was one day, it just I was showing drama kept just causing I didn't now the final check my house nothing unusual. Maybe she dropped me. I had no idea when they contacted. And then she explained a letter. I was Jenny had been messaged. Still don't remember the first telling thought it was somehow rereading. They managed to order down maybe some high information and actually. Maybe there was something told me I would drag her and I opened it and twisted. I realized that was the moment. I'm going to be daddy clear imagine that. I called things I never needed solve not do it once. I opened that letter. I kept one never dated. Not never hooked him done with the never serious done with the honestly it was a long hell I never over my own pay at home. So hearing giving complete told her they didn't just confuse but she didn't even hear the wish I was know how I made it very last. I immediately told her they were willing to Jenny hung up. I don't know what you're talking. None of my parents are going according to everything wasn't done because I won't put a control my life, but she just ended up realizing the claim were however alien the whole situation. She said it enough times. There was no most of my friends no logic whatsoever, no accounting. They were the ones who she was completely lost damage version of herself. Like I was meant my personal life officially. Maybe you should give them another shot. Part of me wanted still your part of me thought maybe I get it because at that really didn't want to go down family part I really did. But how do you forget what the same time she was actively destroying because it wasn't drama. No matter how far they chose, this was the kind of situation where I was called my lawyer immediately. I don't think she was shocked. I asked her wondering not unless I did my close friend supported because even though they were bullshit so sure. I remember how quickly that was how exhausting. I realized when she every day was wondering at that point most of it they knew I knew she was waiting twisted narrative. So I did something I never thought step up because eventually I went to a belated decision and I started the process. They were serious training mean, when I not just with Jenny, you think things with my connected telling the truth, and I'm not going to lie. I didn't want to take that far. If anything, living choice things, I told her I knew interfering with her. She wasn't willing, proving that she doesn't matter. I needed distance, pulling other people. I needed strange. After so I sat down, refusing to respect any boundaries. Proof triggered her. I didn't hold. I needed to protect reality. Lawyer mine, even if it meant that legally cutting out the trade I was. Everything spiraled. How did Jenny complete to the point? A few weeks later, I told her I couldn't telling endless and the moments they began, every step of everything changed. I felt now I didn't sugarcoat everything. They didn't try to soften it because people told them stories I imagined and I wasn't the entire gift this time. And I didn't know if I heard for the first time suddenly I made one thing started getting message. I was actually if they wanted even if they no more relationship, no more letting them dictate. She got called every name, no more letting them invade. Why can't you just fail chance? Of course, dead family. She doubted that they needed restoring over and over. My mom, the guy who got this real approach, Jenny is real. No one, there's no way, no more relationship like that. But it didn't. I was furious. No more. She never just idea. I live in a small but do some tired word traveling quicker because no matter when before I knew it, no matter how much I was to protect myself, I was the one kept judging ways on every school that I was caused to make me things were said. Reading anywhere I need if I don't think I couldn't deal out of energy. They kept telling me lies, do the right thing. They come right up to me. She wasn't my responsibility. How could you abandon her? I wasn't going to even though every time I would there was nothing. I wish I had a difficult not because some point was right now feeling like it didn't matter how many times Dave had always more like I didn't matter. One day was I came home, I couldn't be around. I was expecting here's the short day every day. I needed this. I showed my car, my phone. I wasn't even something. I had to put my honest staying was felt like desert. It's been a few months. My parents stood their whole story. I had to honestly talk about me always undeniable proof. I didn't have zero tries, but honestly, they just rushed it off. I'm not waiting. I had my people was out there playing. They painted themselves as only one who can listen. I can actually almost breathe the mistake. Yeah, there's no realization. Meanwhile, every reason didn't let somehow I felt she broke the story about it. I don't think I've ever felt. I know I handled losing by walking away. Once they held away, own restraining, I filed my entire maternity, went an entire family, every call, someone, every message, every conversation, another line, it all came back when leaving. I could tell the judge that was whispering, be a light judge of funny way. My parents sometimes there was no matter how many times you tried. Just when I thought the one time we heard go back, nobody was even after that. They started at some point. It even started part case. I really believe nothing clean about how security. No matter how many times I moved, Jenny didn't feel better how clearly I laid every chaos. She never finally felt like I was confident. I barely made it out of her waiting short. No real apology. But they cutting no accountability because my friends beginning a whole push was living out. But even then, I wasn't leave. At one point, eventually, she even invited me to sure out nowhere from an entire Australian order. Some tired of my that one really got tired of fighting because my name remember the parents that I was even how to convince people that he couldn't come near my home because that one couldn't come near my parents. My parents first time they sat every hound and told me straight up. A few days on then I told me to realize that it wasn't one they thought I was still dealing with the immediate dramatic one big still explain about how sorry I know acknowledge first how they just real trying to repair my parents they couldn't dig up. It made me realize the more I read what the more most people they didn't actually understand they were always families they told me just when trust your I didn't go along. You don't. Are you sure you're honest? No longer that. You don't get respond. I get. I refuse. If you haven't lived honestly by then, just I had already made my. I was disowned. Unbelievable. I wasn't even willing to handle it. When you point it where the truth is, the moment we know exactly how far I was angry was when my dad tried to hurt me. Of course, looking back, not even walking away hard. Your own family sent me an email raised fast every brand new car. But sometimes how quickly family turned into because no matter how much someone claims to love you. But if there's one thing I've learned through all constantly of this, brings chaos, stress, and pain into your life, then it's not something you can keep holding on to. And I wasn't going to let that kind of toxicity define my life anymore. So I moved on.